The chemtrails program is a weapons system. Dennis Kucinich, H.R. 2977, defined chemtrails as an exotic weapon, not mitigation for global warming. Now, the aerosols in chemtrails may mimic solar radiation management. They may appear to be solar radiation management and obscures the sunlight, but the primary mission of chemtrails has already been defined as an exotic weapon. So keep that in mind when you watch this clip and the confusion may become apparent.
Well, according to the fifth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, chemtrails don't exist. And even though that they don't exist and they're not spraying the sky, they also say that in order to stop global warming, we absolutely mustn't stop doing it.
So by conflating chemtrails with solar radiation management, the report correctly denies that solar radiation management is going on. They're not denying that chemtrails are being sprayed under a military weapon system.
They say if SRM were terminated for any reason, there is high confidence that global surface temperatures will rise very rapidly. The IPCC also denies that such programs exist. Buried deep within Chapter 7, the IPCC simply states that SRM methods are unimplemented and untested. And that's odd, because I thought if we stopped, the planet would heat up.
Well, if chemtrails are different than solar radiation management, and if chemtrails are an exotic weapon, what kinds of things could an exotic weapon do? Could an exotic weapon actually cause global warming? Listen to Dr. Joyce Penner, who is on the United Nations IPCC panel, talk about how contrails can warm the climate.
But if there was a conspiracy to use jet-produced clouds to cool the atmosphere, would it work? No.
The contrails that are spreading that you can identify as contrails, those would tend to warm the atmosphere. Everything that we know about would say that.
So the evidence is clear. The term chemtrails carries a unique definition as an exotic weapon as documented in H.R. 2977. Chemtrails was first published by the Department of Defense as the title to a chemistry manual for future U.S. Air Force pilots. Chemtrails is listed in the Oxford Dictionary. The Chemtrails Manual is available online in PDF format. Chemtrails are not the same as solar radiation management or stratospheric aerosol geoengineering to mitigate global warming. Chemtrails contain ionizing salts and other chemicals that change the electrical characteristics of the atmosphere in ways that do not act as solar radiation management to reflect sunlight back into space. Chemtrails are sprayed low in the troposphere at 30 to 40,000 feet, not in the stratosphere above 60,000 feet, where the term stratospheric aerosol geoengineering prescribes. To say that solar radiation management or stratospheric aerosol geoengineering is the same as chemtrails is incorrect. Furthermore, the use of these terms as an attempt to bow down to the whims of political correctness is wrong and misleading. To say that chemtrails is geoengineering is also misleading, since it implies that geoengineering is the same as solar radiation management or stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. As a geophysical weapon capable of interaction with an array of dangerous electromagnetic emissions, chemtrails are far more than what geoengineering implies. Chemtrails is a real word originated by the prime suspects themselves, the Department of Defense. Chemtrails is used by observers around the planet to best describe what is polluting their atmosphere every hour of every day.
They say if SRM were terminated for any reason, there is high confidence that global surface temperatures will rise very rapidly.
Well, we have to correct an error concerning the interpretation of the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report. Page 27 in the recommendation to policymakers contains language that could have been made less ambiguous with the insertion of a couple more words. After we correct that error, let's go back to the beginning to discover the golden nugget that we completely skipped over. The paragraph starts out by saying, quote, methods that aim to deliberately alter the climate system to counter climate change, termed geoengineering, have been proposed. Limited evidence precludes a comprehensive quantitative assessment of both solar radiation management and carbon dioxide removal. and their impact on the climate system. CDR methods have biogeochemical and technological limitations to their potential on a global scale. There is insufficient knowledge to quantify how much CO2 emissions could be partially offset by CDR on a century timescale. Modeling indicates that SRM, if realizable, have the potential to substantially offset a global temperature rise, but they would also modify the global water cycle and would not reduce ocean acidification. Now, here's the last paragraph in question. Quote, if SRM were terminated for any reason, there's a high confidence that global surface temperatures could rise very rapidly to values consistent with the greenhouse gas forcing. CDR and SRM methods carry side effects and long-term consequences on a global scale. Now, that last sentence is probably clear enough if you really read it with an unbiased mind. However, a couple of words could be inserted there. Let's insert two words to make it even less ambiguous. If SRM were to be terminated for any reason, there's a high confidence that global surface temperatures would rise very rapidly, so on and so forth. So the future perfect tense was never achieved in the translation or the composition of this document. So that to be would probably stop most people from making the assertion that they were talking about a geoengineering program that was already in place, or chemtrails that were already being sprayed. So let's go back to the beginning and look at the golden nugget that we overlooked. It says at the very beginning, methods that aim to deliberately alter the climate system to counter climate change, termed geoengineering, have been proposed. In other words, the act of geoengineering itself is an attempt to alter the climate, no matter the perceived state of the climate to be altered, even if it's later discovered to have been a normal variant. And this is very likely to be the case, since the observations fit so poorly with the IPCC hypothesis. Now, Suspicious Observers is a space weather analyst. He ran across this article about the IPCC and the misinterpretation of the report, and here's what he had to say.
Gotta do a bit of a reality check, seeing a lot of claims like this lately, saying the UN and IPCC admit chemtrails and say that we must continue. Such claims are used to sell advertisements like these. The latest IPCC report does not warn against stopping chemtrails. That article was citing the policymakers' summary, where they described the dangers of stopping solar radiation management once it had begun, meaning it was a hypothetical argument, a reason for potentially not doing it in the future. And indeed, if you take the time to go pull the full draft report, the actual beast of a document submitted to the UN, they're confirming their long-held claims that chemtrails and other aspects of SRM have never been implemented. Vitally important topic, but poor reporting makes us all look crazy.
So the way I see it, the IPCC, Ken Caldera, David Keith feel justified in denying chemtrails because they know it's not primarily intended as solar radiation management. Basically, they are saying that chemtrails, the weather weapons program that's not involved with CO2-based climate change, is none of their business. And top secret clearances act as the gag order to censor discussion of planes that are secretly spraying the skies. After all, the deployment of aerosols is not in the stratosphere, where solar radiation management is proposed to be effective. Instead, the aerosols are sprayed much lower in the troposphere, where artificial clouds warm, not cool, the climate. One could suspect that the UN IPCC was hoping to run out the clock in order to pass hardcore global climate legislation by ignoring the covert chemtrails operation just long enough. But in view of the skyrocketing public awareness of chemtrails as warming the climate, the IPCC is more and more regarded as a consensus of liars.